Yes, the title is a sex joke. But but don't worry now, this isn't some sort of crappy geopolitical corn video, partly because I don't have butter and corn on the cob, which is a damn shame because it goes well with a barbecue, but that's yeah, this isn't a corn video. This is a check-in on our old friend Urho Kekkonen, one of the corners of this timeline. Oh god. Ever since his attempted invasion of the Shabazz Empire, and we use the word attempted here because, well, he can't say the word failed, Urho Kekkonen has just kind of become a sort of nomadic homeless person, without purpose or a proto-Finnic Ugric Holy Roman cognate to go back to, or even a puppet state he can rebound with. He had, well, other than his amazing power, basically nothing left after all this crap. And with his failure of taking control of Bacca and the failure of retaking power over Finland, as the Finno Ugric people blamed him for their destruction and mass cases of autism, Urho Kekkonen just decided that there was nothing left for him in Europe and Asia. So, after several decades of hiding out in caves and villages in the area that is known today as the Russian steppes till the year of 5942 BCE, he got really sad one day and just decided to go to the local tavern and got really drunk. Because of that, he accidentally walked out of the village and uh, drunkenly walked over to the Volga River. And then for about 19 years, he was in a constant hangover all over Siberia until he one day fell over and took a nap in the Mongol steppes. Yes, alcohol is a very strange effect on what are known as virtual gods. He was able to eventually get over his hangover in the year of 5923 BCE, and was and after he, you know, was conscious, he planned on going back over to Europe, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was sadness, perhaps it was a wish for better things, or perhaps it was his hatred of the Finno-Ugric people who had rejected him, and maybe it was because the author of this timeline wants to establish an arc for him. Eh, He, well, he didn't go back to Europe and just decided to stay in Mongolia, and this kind of changed just about everything. You see, he walked around the Mongolian steppes for a while, and one day found a small village that neither he nor I could pronounce the name of. There he met a Mongolian woman named Batar, who was at the time the most beautiful woman in all of Mongolia, and, well, he fell in love with her immediately, and he thought that he found paradise. Unfortunately, the Mongol steppes were ruled by a bunch of tribes who, from an outsider's perspective, were little more than a bunch of warring savages. But Urho was no longer some random outsider, as for years he studied the Mongols and understood why they were the way they are. And it's rather simple. Mongolia is a goddamn desert. If you want to live in that area, you have to be a marauding raider and steal from everybody you know. And if you wanted to populate the region, well, I get banned if I described how to do that. But fortunately for Urho and the Mongols, Urho was a god. Using some of his great power, he waited until a group of particularly hardened Mongols came over to his home in the year of 5919 BCE. When they came over, he demanded to see their leader, and so the leader of this Mongol group came up to Urho and asked what he wanted, and Urho explained that he can make them the ultimate rulers of the Mongolian homeland if they simply worshipped him. The leader of this group of Mongols laughed and asked why they should. After all, he was a random Finnish man that came out of nowhere. Urho smiled at the moment, and in a display of power, He floated into the sky and then clapped his hands. 20 miles all around them suddenly turned from sprawling wastelands to green valleys. This shocked the Mongol group, who immediately bowed down to him and proclaimed their loyalty, saying that I shall never do anything to upset him, and shall make sure that all heretics shall be crushed. Which, you know, very nice of them. So, Urho now had the ideal soldiers, and over a period of 219 years until 5700 BCE, Urho slowly and incrementally conquered Mongolia proper and its outlier regions in China and Siberia. The reason for it was because Urho decided, you know what, I'll unite the Mongol people, and why it was so slow was because Urho really wanted to be careful this time. He didn't want to just conquer a people immediately and have them expect so much. No, he needed to establish a basis of expectations. And in order to make sure that this system of expectations would make sure that the Mongol people stayed loyal to him, he did several unique and very open minded things, which is surprising even for Urho. So, the list of things that Urho did to make sure that the Mongols wouldn't get upset at him for anything was that number one, he turned the Mongols into Mongols by uniting them around a national identity so that they can be a united and coherent people instead of just a bunch of warring tribes and nomads. And this finally ended the divisions in Mongol society and united all of the people without question. Number two, Urho Kekkonen, created a division between church and state, where he allowed the people to worship him, but he wanted them to be loyal to themselves, so that if anything goes wrong, they cannot blame him. And number three, Urho Kekkonen wrote a constitution that gave the Mongols a new nation, the Combine, and he also organized a government, a sort of totalitarian parliamentary democracy. That way he didn't need to micromanage the nation himself, and he could focus on the broader general things and maybe even foreign affairs one day. Number four, Urho Kekkonen used his knowledge of technology and science to make the Combine one of the most effective military forces on the planet, with living conditions to be what the citizens of the Combine to be considered utopians of them. And number five, he finally decided not to present himself as a god, but more like a deity who sought a respectful relationship with the peoples that worshipped him and coexisted with. And it worked very well. Now, if anything went wrong, nobody would blame Urho, which, hey, that's a very good strategy. And while there were many other things that Urho Kekkonen did, this was the general gist of what he did in order to make the Combine and make the Mongol people not go against him ever. So, yeah. But while Urho had made quite incredible progress and had probably revolutionized many things, like creating this sort of government, this sort of system of nationalism, which was unique even for his time, there was always something gnawing at him, and this something was his curiosity about what happened to his former rivals, that being Jackie Chan, Kim Jong un, and the larger empire of the Great Huan. What happened to them? Did they survive the war? He could probably search now. After all, he was in Asia, and he was directly in the land that the Huan once controlled. So, one day he went up to the government of the Combine and asked them to send out some expeditionary groups, not for conquest, but to get a general sense of the lands around them. And they agreed. And, well, when those expedition teams went out of their homeland, oh boy, it was quite a crazy thing. The lands directly south of the Combine were a violent and strange place. Directly on their borders was the new empire of the Jia, a totalitarian regime that was, at the time, trying to violently suppress any forms of internal dissidence and prepare for what Urho could only assume was world conquest, in order to, like, make the emperor of the Jia Empire be a god in his own right, and it was kind of sad from Urho's perspective. And after the Empire of the Jia, directly east of them was the Korean Peninsula. See, it's funny because they have a small. Okay, sorry, seriously. The Empire of the Great Huan still existed, and was now only just confined to the Korean Peninsula. And even Kim Jong un himself was still kicking around, although his position was incredibly tenuous, as he was constantly combating with many factions that were trying to take over the country or influence him. And they just had too many ideas of how to run the empire after the Finno-Korean Hyperwar. And Kim Jong un was having to increasingly return to his father's old authoritarian methods of keeping control. And if you go further south along the Chinese coastline, Hong Kong itself was still around, despite the fact that 95% of the city and 50% of its population were destroyed. But they were still around and rebuilding. And Jackie Chan, do you remember him? Well, he's still kicking as well, and was now the eternal president of the Hong Kong Republic. And Urho Kekkonen was honestly surprised. But he wasn't terrified at the idea that his old rivals were still around. If anything, he was glad that he wasn't the only immortal being around. And if he lost those two people, then he wouldn't know what to do. Because now he could still relate and talk to them and try to make amends. So after this discovery was made, he began to have plans to make the envoys become ambassadors and diplomatic troops in order to make contact with the Empire of the Great Huan and the Hong Kong Republic to sign an official peace treaty to mark the end of the Finno-Korean Hyperwar. Because while it may have ended thousands of years ago, there was no official peace treaty. And if there wasn't, then another war, or the Finno-Korean Hyperwar itself even, would come back up and destroy the world if they didn't make amends now. So, that was the plan. They were going to make peace. Urho was going to make peace. But just as his envoys were about to re-enter the borders of the Combine, they were suddenly ambushed and slaughtered by Jia troops. After that, these soldiers brought the heads of the envoy back to the border of the Combine and officially announced, acting like they had the balls of a goddamn JoJo Joestar, the, they announced that the Combine, the Hong Kong Republic, and the Empire of the Great Huan were to be swept away, and that they would all need to prepare for their funerals in the year of 5650 BCE, because that's when they were going to start their conquest of the world. The Combine, understandably, was enraged, and Urho was too. He then decided that now was the time, and he decided to meet Kim Jong un and Jackie Chan, this time personally and through secret underground tunnels made by the Combine in the event of the Jia Empire declaring war. Though Kim Jong un and Jackie Chan were upset to see him, they too were also glad to find him again. Even though that there was still some bad blood between them for everything, they all did agree that their previous war was a pointless one that never really achieved anything and sacrificed all of human progress for nothing. And they all quickly agreed that they would do the right thing this time and officially formed the United God Front to defeat the Empire of the Jia. And in the year of 5649 BCE, they went to war with the Empire and fought a 5-day long war. Despite it being a war, it was one of peace and trying to be compassionate to the people of the Jia Empire, as Combine, Huan, and Hong Kong troops simply marched through the Chinese countryside and defeated Jian troops without too much death, and liberated entire towns and allowed them to get on with their own business. While the great liberation of the Jian Empire went on, Urho Kekkonen, Jackie Chan, and Kim Jong un decided that they wanted this war to end even faster. So they all chose to get together and march from the borders of the Combine all the way down to the capital, the Xian capital of Chang'an, to defeat the Xian Emperor themselves. But what came was an event that they never expected to happen. Chang'an was a particularly primitive city. Nothing special to look at. It was just old and one that seemed to prioritize only the wealthiest. But Urho, Jackie, and Kim Jong Un entered the capital city, but strangely, it was mostly empty. Other than the few Xian soldiers around that immediately surrendered to them, there was nobody there to stop them, which they all found quite strange. So they continue on to explore. They continue to explore the palace, trying to figure out why it was so empty. But all they could hope for now was that the Emperor was still there. But then they noticed somebody. It was someone they didn't expect to see. It was a young Chinese woman, finely dressed and clearly one of the Xian nobility, and she was unafraid of them. Urho, just looking at this woman, felt something strange, and he asked the woman if she was okay. She couldn't understand them because he was speaking Finnish. So Jackie Chan stepped forward and offered to become a translator by speaking to her in Chinese, to which she understood. So, with Jackie acting as a translator, Urho and the girl were able to communicate with each other. The girl turned out to be the princess of the Xian Emperor, his daughter, and she was quick to explain that this entire war that they've been fighting, which thankfully has not been bloody so far, was a great lie. The Xian Empire truly never did want to kill the envoys of the Combine, but in reality, while they wanted to not have war, some rogue elements apparently did, as by the time the envoys were returning to their homeland, rogue units of the army attacked them. And it wasn't on the orders of the emperor, meaning that it was someone else who caused all of this. Urho asked who could possibly want to start a war against the three gods, and the princess said that she didn't know. But it appears to be a vengeful spirit who wants revenge against the warrior who denied him glory. And it has her father under its control. But even though she knows that her father is a bad man who was a brutal authoritarian, he never did want a war. He was actually planning on reforming the empire quite a bit. But still, she wants him saved. So, but she knows that they can't really promise her this. Still, though, Jackie Chan is curious about this spirit and promises to spare her father when they encounter him, because if he didn't choose this, then he shouldn't suffer for the choices of someone else. The girl, the princess, is grateful, so they pass by her, and she is terrified of what will happen to them. But she begins to feel a sense of hope. After the three passed the princess, they found a door and entered into a huge glowing room, seemingly endless yet beautiful. They never knew this existed. They didn't even know what they were facing at the moment, and they've seen everything. But they looked around, and in the room with them was a man, a short, stout, thin man. Kim Jong Un, Urho, and Jackie Chan approached this man and asked him to turn around as he was facing away from them. The man turned slowly, and it became very clear who he was: the Emperor of the Empire of the Jia. Jackie Chan stepped forward and spoke in Chinese to the Emperor and asked if he was okay. The Emperor looked at the three and then started to cry all of a sudden. He says he never wished to do this. He wanted to fix the mistakes of his fathers, his ancestors. But before he could do anything good, he came. Before Jackie could ask who he is, the Emperor was suddenly swept away, and a new person came into view. They all looked at this new person, and Jackie Chan froze with realization of who it was. It was Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee laughed evilly and told Jackie that he was reincarnated by Ham, the opposite of the god of this timeline, and he was back for one reason: to kill Jackie. Jackie Chan was shocked, and he tells Bruce Lee that they don't need to fight. If anything, they could possibly find out how Bruce Lee even came back, perhaps even help him against this Ham being. But Bruce Lee refused and says that he wants to kill Jackie Chan no matter what he says. Seeing the fruitlessness of trying to speak to him, Jackie Chan tells Kim Jong-un and Urho, who were still looking on in confusion, that he needed to deal with this himself. They agree and decide to step back to watch as an epic fight then ensued. With the empire of the Jia pacified and its political head disappeared, China has been thrown into anarchy, but now the Combine, the the Hong Kong Republic, and the Empire, the Great One, live on to see another day. Through the power of Urho's tactics, Jackie Chan's martial arts, and Kim Jong Un's own strategic brilliance, they had proven something that nobody ever thought was possible. They had proven that even though they used to be in a millennia long spanning war, love and friendship overpowered their previous hatred of each other. So they traveled to the city of Huanyu and they officially signed a peace treaty and brought about the de facto end to the Finno-Korean Hyperwar. With the Finno-Korean Hyperwar now officially over, Urho Kekkonen returned to the Combine as a peacebringer and a national hero. For days, celebrations filled the streets of every city, and wherever he went, he was blessed with so many gifts and so much love that it overwhelmed him always. But while he was happy for his service, he was deeply saddened because while he did do such good things for the Combine, he wanted to do those same good things to his own people, the Finno-Ugric people. He wanted to make it up to them. He wanted to do things right this time, but he knew he couldn't just go back right away after everything. Their hatred will be still fresh in their minds. They will never forget, or at least for as long as possible, forget their tragedy. But Urho had a different idea instead. Instead of just simply waiting around, why doesn't he just skip the wait? Why doesn't he just go into hibernation? So Urho went over to go find Jackie Chan and Kim Jong-un and told them about his plan of hibernating for thousands of years so that he could one day return to Finland. While they were saddened that they wouldn't be seeing their friend for a very long time, they accepted what he wanted and said that they would make sure to keep the peace treaty alive and that he would always be looked after. Appreciating this, he said thank you and went off to go find a place to hibernate, of which we will not know how he went to go do such a thing until the 50s. But now this just leaves us with a new question. With Urho Kekkonen gone to go hibernate, what happened to the Combine? As for the fate of the Combine, if you remember my geopolitical video, you will probably remember that the Dai Nippon Teikoku, the great and benevolent Japanese empire, now owns all of Mongolia. This is because, just like the Mongolia of our timeline, the Combine fell into irrelevance over a period of 5,649 BCE to 4,182 BCE. 1,500 years passed for them, and without the guidance of Urho, they lost their purpose to exist. Many tried to find a new reason, a new national ethos, a new philosophical reasoning for the continued presence for the Combine, but this led just to a long and arduous decline, and eventually The Combine disappeared and just became another lawless landscape that, just like China, and now Japan rules over the land, and none of the original people live there anymore. But don't worry, better things will come as this timeline will go on. And for now, thank you for listening. Have a good day.